Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Sounds Like Sam. I'm your host Sam, and it is officially the end of week 4 in the NFL. I can't believe I'm saying that right now, but it's true. It's the end of the week 4. A lot of crazy stuff happened this week. Gonna go over some news. Gonna go over waiver wire picks for this week. I'm gonna talk about some players who I'm worried about, who I'm not. The great thing about being in week 5 now, or going into week 5, is that now we have 4 weeks of NFL football to work with, and there's some pretty interesting stats to look at, and I'm excited to go over with you today. But before I begin, I just wanted to say thank you for listening. If you haven't already, go subscribe to my podcast. It Sounds Like Sam. You can find it wherever you get your podcasts. I personally like to use Spotify, or recommend using Apple Podcasts or Spotify, but it's literally anywhere that you can find your podcast. If not, I would also recommend following me on Instagram and Twitter at Sounds Like Sam Podcast, and at Bullseye Fantasy, because that's all my fantasy football content. But yeah, let's just get into it. I'm actually not going to go over a 2-minute drill, because every time I do that, I seem to go over the time limit, which is 2 minutes, and I go over in like 7 minutes. So today we're going to do just the biggest news recaps in the NFL right now. It looks like I wrote down 5. So if you live under a rock, you still watch football, but you didn't hear everything, here's some of the biggest news that went down. Javonte Williams, the Denver running back, is now out for the season with a torn Achilles. Cordarrelle Patterson, the running back for the Falcons, is now placed on IR. Kenny Pickett had his debut versus the Jets in the second half of the Steelers-Jets game on Sunday. Tua Tagovailoa is ruled out for week 5. If you didn't watch that game, you could totally tell that he still had some lingering concussion issues, and he was concussed again, and it was just a really awful sight if you watched it live, just to see his what happened with his fingers, and it was just hard to watch. But yeah, hopefully he gets back and is better soon. Wishing him the best. But yeah, that was a big piece of news. Kamara misses second game of the season, which is pretty big news as well. But other than that, that's really all the biggest NFL news I have, or I thought was there. I guess maybe if you want to go over games, like Tampa Bay got whooped by the Kansas City Chiefs, which was the Super Bowl matchup 2 years ago, so that was interesting. But yeah, other than that, good week of football. Alright, here's some top waiver wire grabs that, if you're looking for people, these are the guys to look for, especially in deeper leagues. I'm mostly in 12-team PPR leagues, so that's kind of what I'm looking at. If you have anybody who's like, I don't know, maybe like Chris Godwin or someone, I saw he was available in a 10-team league, which is a bit odd, but I mean, he should be picked up. But any other people, if you have questions or comments, feel free to reach out to me, and I can assist you with some add-ons. But these are the 6 guys I like, at least in week 5. We have Tyler Algier, running back for the Falcons, taking over Cordarrelle Patterson's spot. Right now they're in kind of a running back by committee mode, but I watched the way he played. He looked really good. Averaged 10 yards a carry in this past game. Scored a touchdown. I think he's their go-to back. Can you really trust any of them, of the Falcons running backs? Well, when Cordarrelle Patterson gets back, I think you can trust him. But other than that, I mean, he's more of a stash. I would kind of see how he does, but I think he's an interesting grab. Next guy is going to be wide receiver Josh Reynolds. I know with Amon-Ra St. Brown out for the Detroit Lions, he's had an uptick in roles in his role. But even with St. Brown in, he really has his connection with Jared Goff has been pretty nice, especially from his time at the Rams. So having him there has definitely been, it's been beneficial for him because he's 2 touchdowns on the season. He's had 8 targets or more the past 2 games. He's looking like one of his more go-to targets, especially with Amon-Ra St. Brown out. But with Amon-Ra in, he's Jared's go-to guy. So next guy is going to be George Pickens, wide receiver for the Steelers. With Kenny Pickett's debut, George Pickens seemed to be the big target for Kenny. I like him. I mean, he's put together some really crazy catches so far in the first couple weeks, and even in the preseason. So it's time you start considering him. He's only owned in 37.6% of ESPN leagues. If you need a wide receiver, definitely go and grab him. I think he's going to be a big target, and with Kenny Pickett in, he seemed to really boost that offense. So if you have guys like Najee Harris, the Pat Freiermuth, Deontay Johnson, even Pickens, I think these are going to be the core 4 for the Steelers that you're going to want to own. I don't care about Claypool. Like, I don't want to pick him up. I don't recommend you pick him up, but I guess you do you if you really want to. Okay, next guy is going to be Corey Davis. He's owned in 6.9% of ESPN leagues, and which is pretty surprising. I mean, he's averaged 70 yards at least in 3 of his games so far, and has 2 touchdowns on the season. He looks like he's the wide receiver 2 for the Jets. That was my bad. I didn't even know Garrett Wilson was doing as well as he did. So, I do consider Corey Davis their wide receiver 2 now, behind Wilson, but yeah, he's been playing really well recently. If you need a wide receiver in a deeper league, he's a guy to look for. Another guy who's actually been sneaky good has been Khalil Herbert, who you need to own him if you're in if you have David Montgomery, if he's on your waiver wire. It says at least on ESPN leagues that he's only owned in 82.9% of leagues. The rest of that is 17.1% of leagues that don't have him. You need to go to your waiver wire and pick him up. Same with Jamal Adams. I didn't bring him up, but he should be owned in all leagues right now. I mean, that dude balled out versus the Seahawks. Scored 2 touchdowns, I believe 150 rushing yards. Oh, man went animal on people. I think he has 6 touchdowns on the season. He's a guy to plug in and play for sure the next couple of weeks, at least until DeAndre Swift comes back. And even then, he looks like he's going to be a good flex play because that Lions offense is scoring a lot of points. You're going to want him in. So, but the thing I was going to say about Khalil Herbert too is he's averaged 100 yards from scrimmage every single game of this year so far. So even with David Montgomery in, he's still been averaging 100 yards of scrimmage, which is really good. Which, if you're playing a normal standard fantasy league, that's 10 points, which is money. PPR leagues is a little different. You're going to want a little bit more receiving capabilities out of him. But, you know, he's been doing that too. He had a nice 20-yard reception for the Bears this past weekend, but that's really all he did. But there's definitely something there. So I think he's a guy I got to look for. Next and last guy is going to be Jared Goff. I already talked about the Lions a little bit with Josh Reynolds and his connection with Jared Goff. But, man, Jared Goff has been playing really well. He scored 4 touchdowns in 2 of his 4 games right now. He hasn't thrown any over 300 yards yet, but the offense has been cooking recently. And, you know, I think he's a decent player in fantasy, especially if you're having guys like Matthew Stafford or I don't even know who else is struggling right now. Maybe if you picked up like Trey Lance or something, or like Kirk Cousins, just kind of want someone to be in there. If you have Dak Prescott, I would highly consider adding and starting Jared Goff because he's been playing really, really well, especially with Amon-Ra St. Brown out this past weekend. That was the highest scoring game of the week. The Lions Seahawks, which I don't think anybody expected, but no defense was played, and that's why. But yeah, Lions offense looks pretty good. Alrighty, that was the end of my waiver wire pickups, but I'm going to go on now to my worried, not worried section. I've done similar things, but now I thought I'd take it a little bit more personally and walk you through some players, and we'll see how this one goes. But worried, not worried. I'm going to name players, and I'm going to say if I'm worried or not about them. So, players I'm going to talk about are going to be James Robinson, Jonathan Taylor, James Conner, Jamar Chase, Juju Smith-Schuster, Lamar Jackson. Alright, let's just start from the bottom, because why is Lamar Jackson on here? Should he really be worried about him? No. The reason I put him up there is because he scored 15 points this past weekend versus the Bills, but that's an elite Bills defense. Like, if you're hesitant towards the way he plays, he only threw 140 passing yards. The dude has been balling. He's been the only, legit offense for them going throughout the first 4 weeks. He's been their best playmaker. He is the best player usually on the field. This time, Josh Allen was pretty comparable, but he has been lights out so far this season. If you're giving up on him after one game of posting 15 points in fantasy, then you should really reconsider the way you look at him, because he's elite. I'm not worried about him moving forward. That was a tough Bills defense he played. Next guy is going to be Juju Smith-Schuster of the Kansas City Chiefs. Am I worried or not? I'm worried. Actually, I really don't care. I never was interested in him in the beginning. I would be more... If I'm an owner of him, I'd be worried. Let me put it that way. But with Tyreek Hill out, it changed their offense. And I think they were trying to see who would be a good fit, whether that was going to be Hardman. Is he going to take on the speedster role and be more of a go-to guy for him? Will Juju? Will Marquez Valdes-Scantling? It's been none of those guys. It's been Travis Kelce, and it's been Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Those have been his go-to guys, and I don't really think that's changing. In fact, even they've been getting other random players involved, whether it's Watson or they had some random tight end scored touchdown. They just have so many players that I think they're trying to get involved, because nobody really knows who's going to take over that Tyreek Hill role. I just don't think it's going to be Juju. He hasn't really... He's played okay. He's obviously a big wide receiver, and he's going to get some playing time. Maybe he's still learning the offense. I don't know. But, if I'm owning him and starting him, I don't know that I'd start him. I'd probably look for other people. But yeah, if I have him, I'm worried. Jamar Chase. Yeah, he's not been doing great. Only has one 100-yard game so far. Has 2 touchdowns on the year. But this past game, most of his yards came from the fourth quarter. Am I worried? No, I'm not worried. T. Higgins is taking over. I don't care. He's Jamar Chase. Joe Burrow and him have one of the best connections in the NFL. Yeah, he's struggling a little bit. He's not able to pull everything in right now. Down the stretch, you're going to be sorry if you trade him away. That's my feeling. I wouldn't be worried. It's just week 4 of the NFL season. He's going to get a little better groove going. They haven't been super targeting him. They did the first game, and he went 10 for 16, which isn't great. But, again, I think give him more time. He's been playing some really good defenses. Played 2 of the top cornerbacks in the league so far in Diggs with the Cowboys and Howard on the Miami Dolphins. Even a banged up Howard. I wouldn't be too worried about it. I would stick with him. If someone's asking to trade, if someone's trying to trade you for him, I'd probably accept that trade for him. But next guy is going to be James Conner. Am I worried? Yep. I think owning him definitely makes me a little bit more worried that he's not really going to be who he was last year. And, they've just been struggling a lot. I think it's possible that DeAndre Hopkins not being there is definitely not doing them any favors for the Arizona Cardinals. But, he's getting a decent amount of touches, but he's just not scoring touchdowns. And that's what he did last year. He was a big touchdown guy for them. I think he scored at least 18 touchdowns last season, which was a complete surprise to everybody. So he was very touchdown dependent. He has not been very good in that touchdown category this year so far, but there's a lot of games, so I'm hoping things get better for him. But the offense itself hasn't been great, and they have had to turn a little bit more to Kyler Murray, which isn't at least super surprising. But if I'm a fantasy owner of Connor, I'd be a little bit worried, but I'd still be hoping for the best. Might be time to try and make some trades. Jonathan Taylor, am I worried? Slightly worried. Yeah, he has, if you draft in at number 1 overall, which I think a lot of people did, he's not been playing that great. He had one really good game, which was the first game of the season. Hasn't really broken out of any other game. Their offense really hasn't clicked so far. They played a little bit better in the second half last game, but they were in comeback mode the entire day, and I'm hoping that in the future they can figure out their offense a little bit better. But man, it looks, I don't know if I'd trade him just yet, but you might want to consider trading him for somebody else. If you have any questions about that, feel free to let me know. James Robinson, am I worried? He had 2 points in his last game. No, I'm not worried. Why? I mean, he just played one of the best defensive fronts in the game in the Eagles. And, I mean, they're still the Jags. It's not like you can expect him to be number 2 every single week, but could he possibly be a top 10 running back for you? Yes, he can. I believe so. With the way he's run the ball, I think he's done really well for himself. They were in comeback mode the entire game versus the Eagles. It didn't really help that it was raining the entire day, and just they couldn't get things going their way. But it was mostly a game script issue this past time. It wasn't anything of James Robinson's fault. Did you maybe miss a deadline to get somebody better? Yes, but I think he'll come back and he'll have a couple other good games. And if you want to trade him, then you can do it. But I wouldn't be too worried about it, especially because for a lot of people, he's like their flex. So if you have him as a flex, you're probably doing pretty good right now. So I wouldn't be worried about him. Yeah. So those were my guys. And that was kind of the episode. So if you have any questions or comments, feel free to reach out to me at BullsEyeFantasy on Twitter or on Instagram. Looking forward to week 5, and hope you have a great rest of your night. Peace.